Today we're going to be talking about these, which is transfer cases. But first, I got to take this thing to the car wash because it is disgusting. So if you've never heard of an NP231 transfer case, you're probably fairly new to the Jeep world. But this transfer case was super common amongst Comanches, Cherokees, Wranglers, both YJs and TJs. You could even find them in some Grand Cherokees, you'd find them in some Dodge pickups, and you'd find them in S10 pickups and S10 Blazers. Now this is a Jeep NP231J. This came out of a Cherokee. You would find this in a Wrangler like a YJ or a TJ. You can even find it in a Comanche. I actually picked this up off of Facebook Marketplace for 150 bucks with the slip yoke eliminator on it. Now I did tear it apart, make sure everything was good, cleaned it up, took it, put it all back together, kind of painted some stuff, just made it look nice. Because this is what I'm going to double up to this. This is out of the S10. Now I pulled this out last night. This is an NP231C. Now the internal differences aren't very much. Basically the input shaft here is different and the front housing is different. Everything else from the guts in is pretty much the same. Everything in here, especially the back half of the case, the four-wheel drive part and everything going out, you can actually take this slip yoke eliminator. You can just buy one from TerraFlex or Rough Country or anybody and put that on the back of this and have the exact same mount, have the exact same slip yoke eliminator if you were just wanting to do a single case on your S10 build. So as you can see here, being a Jeep, this is a 23 spline. Some of them are 21 spline if you had a 4-cylinder or a Peugeot tranny, but most of them are 23 spline with 6 studs coming out the front. On a 231C, this is 27 spline, and you have 5 metric holes here that would take the same stud, I believe, but you have bolts that actually hold it in. Otherwise, the rest of this transfer case is the same. Here's your vacuum actuator, here's your plug, here's your shifter, speedo, breather vent. So what I like about this one is it's already done. All I got to do is basically bolt it in. The problem is this front piece wouldn't bolt in to a Chevy. So what I'm going to do instead, though, is take this and put this one here and mount this one behind it. So the thing I wanted to tell you about these cases is they both have the same low range section in them, which basically all NP231s have a 272 to 1 low range. Now what that means is basically the higher the numerical number, the lower your transfer case is, which is actually a really good low range from a factory. Most of your low ranges in transfer cases, like a 205, like what's in the Morvera, is only a 1.98 to 1 low range. Now when I do dual 272 to 1s, what that means is I can put it in low range here and be in high range here, and I basically still have 1 low range. But if I put in low range here, now I've doubled that. So you take 272 times itself, and now I have a 7.4 to 1 low range, which is a heck of a lot lower than most other transfer cases out there, unless you're running a doubler. In this instance, I have tons of rear drive shaft length. So basically I'm doing this, number one, so that I have a cheap way to get a lower transfer case and save my transmission. But also because this gives me a longer front drive shaft, which then allows for all the droop, and I don't have to worry about it so much, and I still got tons and tons of room for the rear end. I'm going to try to get this 30 years of grime off of here because we're going to want this clean for the next part. So now that I've gutted this case out, I got everything over here, I got it cleaned up. This is what I'm using next. And this is basically a doubler kit. And this is going to go in just like that. And what it's going to do is it's going to replace this front half of the case and only use the low range. This part's the low range. The rest of that is just to actuate over to the front wheel drive and into the spline. If you guys have been into off-roading for a long time, you remember old Pirate 4x4 forum, and there was a guy called D&D Machine that made these doublers. Now, I don't know if that guy's still around. He was a nice guy, but he had a bad rap of trying to get a hold of him. You couldn't get him to respond to you. You didn't know when your parts were showing up. You just paid money and got them. I got this from a company in the exact same state called Frolic. And I'm going to tell you, it's the exact same way. I paid my money for it, and I didn't hear anything. No phone calls, no emails, no messages for about 3 months before this showed up. And by the time I actually got him to respond to me, he's like, yeah, I got it, it's on the way. Come to find out, I don't think it's the same guy, but it's just, that's the machine shop thing. They just don't ever answer you or their phone calls. And if you order this, don't expect an instant response. Don't expect it to, show up next week. Don't expect it to be there in a day or two. And don't expect them to get back to you, because none of that happened to me. I bought it, and then I was actually worried that it may never even show up. And about 3 months later, here it is. If you get onto his Facebook page, I noticed that it does say that he waits for so many orders to come in before he machines them. So maybe that's part of it too. So now I just strap this to the table, and I'm going to take my bandsaw here, and I'm going to cut this thing out. Dang. Bing. More aluminum for the scrap metal money bin. So now you got an idea what we're doing. Now I got to TIG weld this thing, but I can't do that here because I don't have a TIG welder, so I'm gonna have to go to my buddy Pat's. Now what I have seen people do is drill holes in here and thread it and tap it and put bolts in this thing on the back side, and then use a JB weld all the way through it. I guess you could do that, but I don't want to do that. I actually want it to be TIG welded. So I'm going to go over there and borrow his tools. So I've had Pat with me on a couple of my adventures, four-wheeling and whatnot, but what you might not know about him is that he was the one, if you guys watch Roadkill at all, David Freiberger, he's the one that actually built his Jeep Scrambler. So if you guys like that Jeep Scrambler, Pat's the guy that actually built it. I'd say he's like the most famous unknown welder out there. Super amazing welder, fabricator. He's done it his whole life, but he is the only guy I know with a TIG welder that will let me use it. And you can't go to Pat's without saying hi to Charlie Dog. So the most important thing when you're welding aluminum is to clean the area thoroughly. It's a lot about prep and less about the welding. Don't expect your welds to come out perfect. Mine are definitely not perfect, and that's fine. This is cast aluminum. There's a lot of impurities in cast anyway, and it's not going to be the prettiest weld on the planet, and I'm by far the best TIG welder out there. But if you guys would like me to do a video on TIG welding, let me know in the comments below, and maybe we can do that in the future. I would suggest hiring this out if you don't know how to weld them. Alright, so I'm back from Pat's, but I got a couple things I want to show you guys. Boomalicious. That's right. Pat actually sold me one of his old TIG welders. I got to fix a switch on it, but other than that, now I'm going to be able to weld my own stuff at my own place. Hey, I'm stoked. Thanks, Pat, for hooking me up, because that's going to be super awesome that I can TIG at my own house. Now I got to figure out where I'm going to fit it in this place. New home for the TIG welder until I can fix this switch. I need a new one of these switches here. And it's just not good. So you can still weld with it, but you can't. You basically have to control the heat here. It's not working on the pedal. So I told you guys I read the comments, and I'm going to answer them for you right now. So a lot of you guys were wondering why I went shackles out front. And there was basically a three-part reason for it. Number one, because when you go with a reverse shackle, the back end now sits higher, meaning I'm going to have a taller lift. I can't stay as low to the ground, and that shackle will get into rocks. If I fall off a rock and I'm trying to back up, now that shackle's in the way of me backing up. You got to remember, this S10 is completely flat bellied, so I want to keep that flat belly, and if I were to slide off a rock but need to back up, with the leaf spring the way it is, I can back up over that rock. So a lot of the people in the comments too are wondering, well, if when you do a reverse shackle, that eliminates bump steer, which that is true, but a lot of that steering is because when you put that shackle in, it's kicking that axle like that, which is also giving you more caster. And when you're steering like this, you're going to have more caster. It's going to return to center better. Most YJs only have about 3 to 4 degrees of caster, and when you put a shackle reversal on it, they'll get like 7 or 8 degrees. And so you're going to get a lot better steering out of it. Things that somebody said is it's better for rock crawling to have a shackle reversal. But realistically, if you have a long arm, your long arm is actually going out farther in the front when you're climbing rocks as well. Plus with a shackle reversal, that tire is now going to go up against the body when it flexes up. And I'm limited here. So what that would mean is I'd have to move the front axle even farther forward, which then turns I may have to delete my headlight. And I don't want to delete my headlight because I need it for those road days on UA. I'm definitely going to need headlights. So I want to keep the front look as much as possible. And lastly, the reason I went with the shackle up front is because of the front bracketry. If I were to have done a shackle reversal, then I would have had to have mounted my leaf springs a lot lower on the frame, or basically in the same position as where my shackles are. And then I'd have had to support those going across, which would have made a lot lower approach angle, a lot more stuff hanging down lower. Where if I have my shackles up front, I can still cross brace my frame, which was another question you guys had. Am I going to brace the frame? Absolutely. Even though it is boxed from all the way to the cab, this is a boxed frame. But I am going to support it to keep it from twisting. But I can do it at a much higher point up at the upper shackle mount instead of down at the lower shackle mount like Matt had to do with the Comanche. And those are all the reasons that I kept the shackles in front. So I hope that answers you guys' question. Also with the rear, I am definitely bobbing the bed, so there's no worries there. I am not going to have the JT overhang. Okay, so while I have the transfer case out, I have this cross member. It's going to be right in the center of my drive shaft. So I'm going to go ahead and modify this thing so that I can fit my drive shaft. The way I'm going to do that is with my cardboard aided design or my CAD program that I have myself. In this case, I was out of cardboard, but I had construction paper. So it's construction paper aided design. But basically that's where my new bracket's going to be. And this is the gap that I'm going to have to take out. All right, now that I got everything welded up and braced and gusseted, I can go ahead and cut these off, and then I'll just plate each side. I'll build a plate that covers each one of those, and now we have our whole new cross member that'll fit our drive shaft. Ooh, that could have been my toe. So I trimmed it up and got a couple pieces here, and these will be perfect layout templates for my metal caps to weld in on this thing. This is my indoor paint booth. I hope you guys like it. I'm just going to hit it with a little bit of Duplicolor flat black just to give it a nice little fresh coat before I throw it back under the truck. And just like that, we got a cross member that clears drive shafts. Oh yeah. You guys like my transmission jack? Thing's so awesome. Yeah, but that's $10 in steel right there, so I really couldn't beat that. Probably the cheapest cross member I've ever made. I lost the footage that I was doing this with, but I wanted to show you guys real quick. If you ever were welding something, like let's say you're doing a weld-on bead lock or anything else, in this case, this is a TIG welded aluminum brace, so I don't want it to leak. I want to make sure none of the tranny fluid comes out. So what I wanted to do is pressure check it. Well, to pressure test something that's open like this, you really can't put actual pressure to it. But what you can do is you can take it and spray it with some soapy water, just like that. Take your blowgun and just blow behind it. And if you start seeing any bubbles, then you know that you have a hole there. And then you can fix that. You can just, TIG a little bit or weld a little bit if you got a wire feed or whatever that you can weld in and fill that little pinhole up. But that's an easy way to pressure test a weld that you can't actually pressure test. And my buddy Pat actually showed me that a few years back, and it's something that I've used since. That's just it's a great tool. So just like I did with this, you can also do that with like a weld-on bead lock wheel or something. When you weld it on, spray it with soapy water, hit it with air underneath. If you see it bubble up, then you know you got a pinhole and you want to fix that before you actually mount them up on tires because they're going to leak. So this right here is what's in your standard NP231J. This is your Jeep, your regular Jeep transfer case. Has 3 of these planetary gears that sits inside of this gear, and that's basically your low range, is what this is. This creates your low range for you. This is what's in the S10. Basically the same thing, except it has 4 of them. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. So you're going to have that much more contact pattern. It's going to be that much stronger. Now what I have here is a 6-pinion planetary, and I got this off of eBay for 60 bucks. And this thing will straight up, I just got to replace this piece, put it in here, and now I have the strongest doubler basically I can get. This is what's in pretty much every aftermarket doubler there is out there, is a 6-pinion planetary, and that's because they're the strongest. Now there is one thing you need to remember if you're going to order one of these for your transfer case, is if it's a 93 and older, it's going to have these flatter gears on it. If it's a 94 and newer, see how these gears are much sharper. If I put it side by side, maybe you can see that a little better, but you can see how these are much sharper than these flatter ones. So you got to know what transfer case you got as opposed to which planetary you're going to need. Ooh. Scary snap rings. Always trying to attack me. There we go. Slide that bearing off. Then there's one clip here. You just got to pull this snap ring out. That should let the whole thing out, and it does. And that's all it takes. Now there are these little shims here, basically these slider guides for the oiler. So we'll just make sure that when we pull this one out here, And then pull one of these guides out. That guide can stay in the bottom of there. Put these back in here. Set this in. Look at that. Perfect. One in. Put the clip back in. You also want to make sure this side's up because you have to clip this into the kit, into the housing, to make sure it holds this up in there. The strongest 6-pinion planetary, basically what's in any doubler. So that's a win for me. For $60, I'll do that every day of the week. Now I should mention you can also do this to your regular 231. You don't have to do it just to a doubler, but if you're gonna do a doubler, you definitely, this is an upgrade you definitely want to do, because there's a reason why every doubler out there that is this style basically has a 6-pinion planetary. Oh. Now we just got to force that bearing in just a little bit because it's kind of a tight fit. Alrighty. Snap ring pliers for the win. May have to get my smaller ones. Nope, we got it. Oh yeah, so much better. All that contact. So what I could do here now is pull apart my 231 again, and then put this one in there, and then I'd have a 4-pinion planetary for my secondary case, my main case, and it would just be, like I said, I mean, what is that, about 20% stronger? I think I may do that after I finish this thing. All right. So right here is where the shifter comes out, where this thing actually shifts you from 4-wheel drive to 2-wheel drive and all that. And there's a little O-ring here, and then this like nylon ring that kind of holds it in there. Now before I put these back in, I did pull them out because the heat here gets so hot when you're welding. But I'm going to go ahead and put some red grease on here, and I'm going to go ahead and red grease the shaft here before I slide it through. And what that's going to do is help just give it a little bit of extra seal, because you don't want it to leak anything right there. All right, next thing we got to put in is our spring for the shifter. Basically the detent spring that keeps everything in check. And then for the top part, we have this one, which is basically completely useless at this point. All that does is open up the vacuum into the other ones. I like to do a very small bit of grease right here when I slide that in. And that's just because I don't want it to start dry. Basically, there's no pump in here now. So when I fill this with oil, that's all that's going to have. I also like to put just a little bit of grease on these guides as well. At this point, this would sit right here, and this would be basically your 4-wheel drive actuation that would push the chain out to go 4-wheel drive. But we're not going to use this. We only need the high and low range. So what we got to do here is I got to pull this, I got to drill this out, pull this pin out, and then we can slide this piece off, and then we're going to cut this. They've set this up with the tiniest bit of recess right here, and that's for this shaft. I'm going to go across here with a guide, measure that flush, and then come up just maybe a ½ inch and cut it. A lot of times you can just tap this, but in this case, somebody actually welded this one on, so I'm going to have to try to cut it out or torch it out or whatever, but I'm going to try cutting first. I think we got it. Yeah, there we go. Ta-da! Simple enough. Thing's all the way down in there, and I know I just want to cut it back just a little bit higher. It's guaranteed that this is hardened alloy steel, so if I were to try to just put this on a metal blade, it's going to sit there and cut on it forever. So what I'm going to do is just use that same cutoff wheel, and I'm going to try to be as true and straight as possible. Now you could use a chop saw, but I really don't think it's that important. It's just got to stay in place. Now, not all castings may be the same, but if you're wondering what I cut mine to, I cut it to 6 3/4 inches. Perfect. Goodbye all this stuff. Now we're at the point where we want to adapt these two together. And the trick to that is you got to pull these studs out, which I had just temporarily put these in because I'd pulled the original ones out anyway, and I just had these as backups. But just to kind of give you an idea of what it looked like. So these are actually going to go in its place. Before you do all this, you don't want to silicone this up just yet. Once you put it all back together, you want to silicone every piece together. But this is one of those deals where you're going to want to check it before you actually finalize it. That was my fingy. Alright, now what we want to do is mount this on. And what I'd suggest is basically lining it right back up with where it was, because I'm running a 231. The Transfercase, or the drive shaft should clear. If the drive shaft doesn't clear, that's when you got to start clocking this thing a little bit until you can find that sweet spot that it clears all the stuff you need it to clear. Because I'm sticking with dual 231s, I think I can run this right in line. Now when you're putting these in for final install, you're going to want to Loctite them as well. Right here is 2-wheel high range, and it just rolls perfectly in line. Here's 4 high. So now we're in line here. Everything spins at the same rotation. Here's 4 low. So you can see I'm spinning quite a bit faster here. I'm spinning quite a bit faster here than this is spinning. So that's a 272 to 1. Now if I were to put this up to there, okay, now we're in double low. So now I'm at 7.4 to 1. Meaning I'm going to go almost 7.5 rotations here to get one solid rotation out of the drive shaft. And it's basically that simple. I still got to put this cover on, but I wanted to go ahead and just get a brand new seal before I put this in, because you know, you got it apart, you might as well do it, and that's going to make sure you don't have any fluid come out the front. And we just built the ultimate 231. We basically now have all the low range you can get. If you have a manual transmission, this is a definitely desired item. Now, if you have a Wrangler or something with a short wheelbase, I would suggest probably doing a Dana 300, because that's going to be about this long as opposed to a 231 that's this long. So that'll shorten it up quite a bit, and that'll keep your rear drive shaft length where you need it. If you've got like what I got, where I have an astronomical amount of rear drive shaft, then this actually may help me, and it's going to give me a better approach for my front drive shaft as well. That's going to allow it to be a shorter throw for more flexing. So basically all I got to do now is tear everything back apart, silicone everything, bolt it back up, and then I can set it underneath there. I can fill it up through the sight glass, or I could even fill it up over here through the vent tube, or however I want. And then obviously the rear case fills up just like any rear case. And that's about it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that it gave you an idea of what it is. And this kit is literally $485. So otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.